We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
President Biden asked for the media to treat him better, and like supplicants to the fount, we see a rash of stories explaining how poor old president has been badly mistreated. And even headlines that question if criticizing said commander-in-chief could lead to the downfall of the republic. You know you're being lied to when the spin goes off the chart, but is Biden the chief beneficiary of this fourth estate largesse? Or is ideology and the coming entrenchment of such the real goal? Welcome to Liberty Nation Radio here on the Radio America Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. On today's show, we're going to find out just how deep the cozy cartel of government media really goes. We'll be asking, how much of this spin is the American public expected to believe? And most importantly, why they won't. We'll also be talking liberty with our constitutional caped crusader, Scott Cosenza. All this and more. I'd like to say a special hello to our listeners in Knoxville, Tennessee on WETR 760 AM and 92.3 FM. Great to have you all here. Remember, this show is proudly sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access podcasts, breaking news, analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. The Soviet Union was famed for its use of propaganda. Every state organ was determined to curry favor with the ruling elite to the point where the public was more informed if they ignored the news altogether. Or as Mark Twain once put it, if you don't read the newspaper, you're uninformed. If you read the newspaper, you're misinformed. Perhaps it seems something fantastical to suggest that the modern America is on the same trajectory, but then anything is possible. Now, to help us sort the fact from the fiction on this, we're lucky enough to be joined by LibertyNation.com editor-in-chief, Lisa K. Donner. Thanks for being here, Lisa.
Happy to be here, Mark.
So, Lisa, please, give me the current prognosis. Has this current crop of useful idiots in the Fourth Estate, have they gone too far? And can the patient, being American press freedom, be saved?
Well, you know, press is, the media in America has always been a bucking bronco. I mean, anybody that thinks that the media is just crazy now doesn't understand American history. It's always been kind of crazy. But I think what we have going on now is one segment of the media is so aligned with one political party that what's had to happen is that other people have had to crop up to sort of give balance. There's going to be other people that crop up and take away their viewers, their readers, and that's what's happening now.
And they do seem to be retaliating against that kind of thing. You have a popular podcast host like Joe Rogan, which CNN never fails to try and take a pot shot at. But I think that's because he has a larger audience than CNN. And it's the same with many of these up-and-coming podcasters, newscasters, people who have websites or news services. And it seems that it's time to start calling these, let's call them the left-leaning entities in the cable news networks. They're trying to take shots at the new kids on the block to try and keep them down, to preserve their own space. And I think that's like a serious ethical question here. Because we do talk a lot about accountability in the press, but what happens when other press outlets don't hold their own colleagues or, let's say, call them competitors of a similar ilk to account? So,
well, I think, Mark, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I think they're threatened. You know, the traditional newspaper business is being threatened. So these big newspapers are starting large online businesses, right? And so what they try to do is they try to talk about alternative media as if it's some kind of vast right-wing conspiracy. So they try to reduce the legitimacy of the right-wing media. And, you know, I think they do that because they're threatened. If you look at somebody like Chris Wallace this week, for instance, Chris Wallace was on Fox. Now, he was not well liked among conservatives, but he has moved to CNN Plus, which is their online streaming. Fox Nation is Fox News's online streaming operation. This was not an upward move. This was not even a sideways move. This had to be in some sense, a kick out the door. You have to figure. So, And other people have tried to make those jumps back and forth. Megyn Kelly is one example. She goes to NBC and now she's got a podcast. The media is becoming more, I'd say, ghettoized, but that's because it had to become ghettoized to become balanced.
I think that really leads me nicely onto the question I really wanted to ask. Now, you recently wrote an article on libertynation.com titled 2021's Biggest Laugh Line, Media Treats Biden Worse Than Trump. Now, the premise here is that a notable Washington, D.C. newspaper was trying to make the case that Trump was treated more fairly by the press than Joe Biden. Now, I've got two questions on that. Number one, how can they write that with a straight face? And number two, do they believe that the public is really buying that?
You know what I think? Actually, this article was written by Dana Milbank, and it was an opinion piece, but he tried to gin up some facts. So what he did was he cited 10 headlines from the Politico Playbook newsletter. And he ran an artificial intelligence and AI algorithm as proof of his supposition. So he's looking up a bunch of different adjectives and boom, guess what he came up with? He led to the conclusion that, quote, my colleagues in the media are serving as accessories to the murder of democracy. Talk about a hyperbole.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, the idea that, because basically how these AI algorithms would work, they'd be looking for adjectives specifically with negative tone. So, for example, there might be, in a Biden article, there might be troubled President Biden has issues getting the Build Back Better Act passed, for example. But then that's given the exact same weight as Trump is literally Hitler and he's so bad he's killing people. And that would be given the same weight in terms of the algorithm when they're divvying up, who received the most negative coverage for the period. But as you can see, the two really don't compare. The article itself appears as though the Biden administration asked for it to be put out themselves.
Well, it's interesting because I think Milbank is running interference for Psaki, et cetera. Let me bring you forward to the media watchdog, the Media Research Center. These people are really the gold standard. I mean,
the MRC, yeah.
Yeah, the MRC started years and years ago. They started, taping and recording and digitizing and listening, and they have people there paying attention and writing up summaries, and from that they do all this research, tons of research, and then they're able to figure out, what is left-leaning, what is right-leaning, et cetera, et cetera. But Tim Graham of the MRC had a great quote that I want to share with you. About the Milbank article, he said, I cry BS, a mountain of BS. You don't assign a computer to read for adjectives, just what you were saying, in 200,000 articles and claim media bias. There's no way we at Newsbusters, that's MRC, would be able to read 200,000 articles in 15 minutes and say, voila. But who needs a human media analyst? Milbank's clown car is speeding down the information superhighway, unquote.
That is a beautiful quote and a perfect place to leave this. Lisa K. Donna, thank you ever so much.
Thank you, Mark.
Now don't go anywhere. Later in the show, we're discussing California, guns and abortion on our special Talking Liberty segment. But after this short break, we're back talking with author Onar on the cult of wokeism. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides. Who are we? We are Americans that believe in liberty. We are a project of the nonprofit One Generation Away. We are patriots who apply the founding principles to the issues of today.
And they keep moving the goalposts on us.
We are educators and commentators who love America and the Constitution. Who are we? We are Liberty Nation.